He ghosted me after our date, so I sent him my wedding invitation. My hands shook as I sealed the ivory envelope, watching his name disappear beneath the elegant flap. Marcus Hayes. 2 years ago, those letters would have made my heart race with hope. Now they meant something different. This wasn't revenge. It was poetry written in the language of growth, a final punctuation mark on a chapter that once felt unfinished. I pressed the seal down firmly, feeling the weight of everything that had changed since the night he vanished from my life without explanation. 2 years earlier, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, applying lipstick for the 3rd time. My best friend Maya had set us up, insisting we were perfect for each other. He's kind, funny, and actually has his life together, she'd promised. I'd been single for 8 months, and the loneliness was starting to feel like a permanent condition. When Marcus texted that morning with, "Can't wait to meet you tonight," I'd read it 20 times, analyzing every word for hidden meaning. Hope felt dangerous, but I let myself feel it anyway. The restaurant he chose was small and intimate, with candles flickering on every table. Marcus arrived 5 minutes early, wearing a navy sweater that matched his eyes. When he smiled, I felt my nervousness dissolve into something warmer. We talked for 3 hours, our food growing cold as conversation flowed effortlessly. He told me about his work as an architect, his dream of designing sustainable buildings, and how he'd moved to the city 2 years ago. I shared stories about my job as a teacher, my love of old bookstores, and my terrible attempts at learning guitar. "This has been incredible," he said as we walked to our cars. The autumn air was crisp, and I could see my breath forming small clouds between us. He touched my arm gently, and electricity ran through me. "I'd really like to see you again." I drove home with the windows down despite the cold, letting the wind whip through my hair while I grinned like an idiot. That night, I texted him, "Thank you for tonight." It was wonderful. I watched the message turn to delivered, then read. The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. I woke up checking my phone. Nothing. Maybe he was busy with work, I reasoned. The morning passed in a blur of lessons and student questions, but my mind kept drifting to that typing bubble. Had I said something wrong? Been too forward with my text? By afternoon, I'd convinced myself he was probably in meetings. By evening, doubt had settled into my chest like a stone. Maya called that night, excited for details. "It was amazing," I told her, trying to keep the uncertainty from my voice. "He said he wanted to see me again." Day 2 of silence felt heavier. I replayed every moment from our date, searching for the exact second I'd ruined everything. Was it when I laughed too loudly at his joke? When I mentioned my ex briefly while explaining why I'd moved apartments? I texted Maya. "Still nothing." She responded immediately, "Give it time." Guys are weird about texting, but something in my gut whispered that this wasn't about texting habits. This was about disappearing. I'd been ghosted before, but never after a date that felt so real, so promising, so alive with possibility. By day 5, I'd moved past excuses into anger. I opened Instagram, and there he was, posting photos from a hiking trip, liking his friends' pictures, clearly alive and well with a functioning phone. The betrayal burned in my throat. I drafted a message 3 times. "Hey, just wondering if you're okay?" Delete. "Did I do something wrong?" Delete. "You're a coward." Delete. Instead, I posted my own photo, smiling at a coffee shop, pretending I wasn't checking to see if he'd view it. He did. No message. Just that small, circular profile picture in my story views, proof that I was visible but not worth responding to. Maya came over with wine and sympathy. "He's just a coward," she said firmly, pouring me a generous glass. "This has nothing to do with you." But it felt like everything to do with me. If I'd been prettier, funnier, more interesting, he wouldn't have vanished. "You're spiraling," Maya said, reading my face. "Stop making his bad behavior about your worth." I wanted to believe her, but depression doesn't listen to logic. That night, I lay awake constructing elaborate scenarios. Maybe he'd gotten back with an ex. Maybe he was secretly married. Maybe I was just forgettable. someone easy to discard after 3 hours of pretending to care. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror again, but this time I barely recognized myself. My eyes were puffy from crying, mascara smudged from yesterday. My hair needed washing. I'd stopped putting in effort because what was the point? He'd taken something from me when he disappeared, something I couldn't name but felt missing nonetheless. My confidence, maybe? My trust in my own judgment. The belief that I deserved basic human decency. I looked at this tired version of myself and felt a flash of anger, not at him anymore, but at me for giving a stranger this much power over my peace. That moment in the mirror changed something. I deleted his number, not dramatically but quietly, like closing a book I'd never finish. I cried one last time, proper heaving sobs that shook my shoulders and left me exhausted. Then I was done. Not healed, not over it, but done waiting for apologies that would never arrive, explanations that wouldn't satisfy, closure from someone who'd already shown me exactly who he was. Maya had been right. He was a coward, and I was done letting cowards determine my value. The next morning, I woke up and didn't check my phone first thing. It was a small victory, but it was mine. The rebuilding happened slowly, in tiny increments too small to photograph but significant enough to feel. I started going to the gym before work, not to look different but to feel stronger. I bought a journal and filled pages with messy thoughts, untangling the knot of hurt that had lived in my chest. I said yes to dinner invitations I would have declined while wallowing. I took myself to movies, bookstores, and Sunday morning farmers markets. The silence in my life, once heavy with absence, became lighter. I was learning to fill space with my own presence instead of someone else's attention. 4 months after that awful date, I applied for a position I never thought I'd be qualified for: lead curriculum developer at our school district. The old version of me would have talked herself out of even trying. But something had shifted. If I could survive being ghosted and rebuild my self-worth brick by brick, I could handle a job interview. I prepared for 2 weeks, practiced answers until they felt natural, and walked into that conference room with my shoulders back. 3 days later, they offered me the position. I called Maya screaming. This success was mine alone, untainted by anyone's validation except my own. The glow-up everyone talks about isn't just physical, though I did start dressing better, taking care of my skin, getting regular haircuts. The real transformation happened internally, in places no one could see. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I learned to say no without explaining myself to death. I discovered that my worth wasn't determined by who chose to stay or leave, but by how I chose to see myself. When I looked in the mirror now, I saw someone who'd survived disappointment and come out softer but stronger, wounded but not broken. I liked this version of myself better than the one who'd waited desperately for texts that never came. 7 months post-ghosting, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Hey, stranger. I know it's been a while. I've been thinking about you." My heart didn't race like it once would have. Instead, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I read the message 3 times, noting the casual tone, the lack of apology, the audacity of thinking about you after months of silence. I could picture exactly what had happened. He'd probably been dating someone it hadn't worked out, and now he was cycling back through his options. I stared at those words for a full minute. Then I smiled, deleted the message, and blocked the number. It felt like freedom. 2 weeks after deleting Marcus's message, I met Oliver at a community bookstore event. He wasn't flashy or overwhelming. He was steady, the way lighthouses are steady, guiding without demanding attention. We talked about our favorite novels, disagreed about poetry, and laughed at the terrible coffee they served. When we exchanged numbers, he texted me that same evening. "Really enjoyed meeting you. Would love to continue that conversation over actual good coffee." It was simple, clear, without games or mystery. The next day, he followed up to confirm our plans. This was what consistency looked like, what genuine interest felt like. It was the opposite of everything I'd once chased, and it felt like coming home. Oliver and I dated for a year before he proposed, and it was the most peaceful year of my life. No guessing games, no analyzing text response times, no wondering where I stood. He showed up, consistently and completely, in ways that made Marcus's disappearance look like the gift it actually was. We were at the beach, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink when he took my hand. "I don't want to imagine my life without you in it," he said simply. The proposal wasn't elaborate or Instagram-worthy, but it was real. I said yes through tears that tasted like healing, like every painful moment had been leading me here, to this man, to this peace. Planning our wedding was surprisingly joyful. Oliver's calm presence kept me grounded when decisions felt overwhelming. We wanted something small and intimate, just family and close friends who'd actually witnessed our relationship develop. Maya was my maid of honor, obviously, and she kept making jokes about how different this felt from my dating disaster era. "Remember when you used to analyze text punctuation?" she teased while we addressed invitations. I laughed, but the memory felt distant, like it had happened to a different person. While working through our guest list, I came across old contacts I'd never deleted. One name stopped my pen mid-air: Marcus Hayes. I stared at his name for a long time. Oliver was in the kitchen making dinner, humming some song I didn't recognize. The scent of garlic and herbs drifted through our apartment, this life we'd built together with patience and care. I thought about the girl who'd waited desperately by her phone, who'd questioned her worth because a stranger chose silence over honesty. Then I thought about who I'd become in the aftermath of that pain. Without Marcus's ghosting, I might have settled for less. I might never have learned to value consistency over chemistry, presence over potential. I grabbed a fresh invitation from our stack and wrote his name carefully across the envelope. Oliver glanced over but didn't ask. He just smiled, trusting me completely. Walking to the mailbox felt cinematic, like the final scene of a movie I'd been writing for 2 years. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and autumn leaves crunched under my feet. The same season when everything had fallen apart and somehow, eventually, come back together better than before. I held the envelope carefully, feeling its weight, feeling the significance of this small gesture that wasn't about him at all, but about me, about showing myself how far I'd traveled from that place of desperate waiting. I opened the mailbox, the metal hinge creaking softly, and dropped the invitation inside. It landed with a gentle thud that sounded like closure, like an ending I'd written myself. The memories came in flashes as I walked back home. The unread text that had haunted me for days. The typing bubble that appeared and vanished like a cruel joke. The nights I'd cried into my pillow, wondering what was wrong with me. The morning I'd looked in the mirror and decided I was done being a victim of someone else's cowardice. The job interview I'd nailed because heartbreak had made me braver, meeting Oliver and recognizing real love because I'd experienced the absence of it. Every painful piece had been necessary. Every tear had watered the seeds of who I was becoming. Marcus had taught me what silence sounded like, so I'd filled it with the sound of my own growth, my own happiness, my own voice, finally believing I was enough. Our wedding day arrived with perfect autumn weather. Cool but sunny, the kind of day that feels blessed. I stood in front of the mirror again, but this time I glowed, not from the professional makeup or the elegant dress, but from something deeper: peace, contentment, the absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. Maya fixed my veil, tears already streaming down her face. "You look so happy," she whispered. "I am," I said, and meant it completely. This wasn't happiness borrowed from someone else's attention or validation. This was joy I'd cultivated in my own garden, watered with self-love and patience. Oliver was waiting for me, and unlike Marcus, he'd never made me question his commitment for a single second. Across town, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at an ivory envelope he'd found in his mail. His name was written in elegant script he didn't recognize. When he opened it, confusion washed over his face as he read the wedding invitation. Her name brought back memories of a date that had gone well. Too well, perhaps, which was why he'd panicked. He'd been fresh out of a relationship then, not ready, too scared to admit that he'd felt something real. So he'd done what cowards do. Disappeared. Now, here was proof that she'd moved on, found someone who deserved her, built a life without him. A strange pang of regret settled in his chest. He thought about texting her, maybe with congratulations. Then he remembered he'd been blocked months ago. The invitation felt like what it was, a ghost of his own making, haunting him. Marcus didn't come to the wedding. I knew he wouldn't. The invitation wasn't an actual request for his presence, but a symbol of my absence from that story of waiting and wondering. He'd chosen silence 2 years ago. I'd chosen to fill that silence with something beautiful. As I walked down the aisle toward Oliver, I felt no bitterness, no lingering pain from that long-ago ghosting. If anything, I felt grateful. Grateful that Marcus had showed me exactly who he was before I'd invested anything real. Grateful that his cowardice had pushed me toward self-discovery. Grateful that the universe had protected me from someone incapable of basic communication by sending me toward someone who'd never make me guess where I stood. At the reception, Maya raised her glass for a toast, her voice thick with emotion. I set my best friend up on a date 2 years ago that ended disastrously. He ghosted her without explanation, and I watched her question everything about herself. But from that pain, I witnessed the most incredible transformation. She stopped waiting for texts and started writing her own story. She stopped seeking validation and started validating herself. And then Oliver came along, and I watched my friend finally receive the love she'd always deserved. Maya turned to me, tears flowing freely now. To the woman who taught me that sometimes the worst thing that happens to us is actually preparing us for the best thing. To choosing yourself first. Always. Later that night, Oliver and I stood on the balcony of our hotel room, watching the city lights twinkle below us. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, pulling me close. I thought about Marcus opening that invitation, about the girl who'd cried over his silence, about the woman I'd become who could send that invitation without anger or pain. I was thinking about how perfectly everything worked out, I said honestly, about how what felt like rejection was actually redirection. Oliver kissed my forehead, this man who'd never once made me wonder or wait or question my worth. Marcus had taught me what silence sounded like, cold and empty and cruel. So I'd filled it with the sound of my own happiness, the laughter of genuine love, and the quiet confidence of a woman who finally knew her value. He ghosted me after our date, so I sent him my wedding invitation, not as revenge, but as proof that I'd already won.